am an administrator, yet I cannot administrate. I tried editing this registry key. Full permissions, full ownership. Yet an invisible force is blocking me. Meet the culprit, UCPD, hidden Windows driver. Disable it and something silently turns it back on. Why is Microsoft locking me out of my own OS? And how do you get rid of it? Let's look inside. In case you're wondering, no, I am not cheating. I have full permission and even ownership on this registry key, but Windows still says, no, you can't do that. Looking at Procmon, we find an access denied error with our key, yet no indication as to why that happened. This can only mean that the write is prevented by a driver that listens to registry edits. In 2024, Microsoft added just that into Windows, a new minifilter driver. In short, a minifilter driver is one that sits between the operating system forwarding your write request and the disk driver that actually writes a change to disk. At that layer, it has the power to allow or deny the passing of any write. And most specifically, our friend UCPD is such a minifilter, which particularly listens to registry writes and can decide to block them if it deems them unworthy. Before we continue going deeper, you probably ask yourself, why would Microsoft do that? To understand that, we need to understand the history of access control in Windows. In previous times, Windows used to be the Wild West security-wise. On old Windows installations like 95 or 98, very little prevented you from accessing anything at all. In fact, if you were using a Windows as late as Windows XP, chances are you used an admin account with no limitations, so both you and any software you ran could modify the system in any way or capacity, whether you wanted it or not. You would get no prompts for anything at all. While it sounds great in theory, it turned out to be a great curse. Even if we disregard malware entirely, ever so often, software you installed came with its own toolbars or even browsers, which would insert themselves as the default browser, forcing you to use their ad and sponsorship-riddled slop so they could make some dollars off your back. On the other side of the road, we find a highly protective Microsoft who, particularly in recent times, absolutely doesn't want you using any browser other than Microsoft Edge. As such, they made changing your default browser an ever-increasing hassle, as we've already seen in a previous video from 2021. So in 2022, the EU stepped in with the Digital Markets Act, which states that gatekeeper companies, that's companies with a gigantic market share, must not prevent or make the usage of competitor software difficult. And yes, Microsoft, that includes you. Thus, Microsoft was forced to make changing your default browser easy again, while at the same time not opening the door to scammy companies trying to hijack all the system defaults. So in 2024, they came up with a brand new thing to satisfy both ends of the equation. UCPD.sys, which is short for User Choice Protection Driver. Its purported job is to protect the user choices. To do so, it will stop unintended edits to certain registry keys that represent user choices, for example, your default browser. This sparked controversy among power users who were confronted by this error and felt somehow distrusted by Microsoft to manage their own OS. People feel like they're losing control over their own OS and, ironically, their own user choices. Though I have to admit that Microsoft's selected term user choices is doing some heavy lifting here, and we will find out soon why that is the case. So back to our driver. The driver runs as a Windows service in the background all the time, though you cannot find it in services MSC, which makes sense because we're dealing with a file system driver here. The terminal reveals it if you look for it. You can also find it with the service control query, but only if you look for drivers specifically. Being a file system driver, you also cannot just turn it off via the command line like you would turn off any other service. That's not because Microsoft is so mean and trying to prevent you from turning it off, even though that part is true for unrelated reasons, as we will see. It's because such drivers are either loaded, or not loaded upon boot time, and you cannot change that status during the system's operations. This in turn means that you can disable it and then reboot. You see that now the driver appears as stopped. Excellent. But don't celebrate just yet. If you reboot once more, you see that the driver is back. What the heck is going on? It appears that in an obscure subfolder of the task scheduler, there is a thing called UCPD velocity. Velocity in this case is probably not referring to Microsoft's cache implementation of the same name, but rather an allusion to the Windows Feature Store, as it is known internally at Microsoft. This shows us that at some point in the past, they A/B tested this driver, and so the name stuck with this task. All it does is run an executable called UCPD.mgr.exe at every logon. And what exactly does it do? As we can see in Procmon, a heck ton of things. In just under 100 milliseconds, UCPD.mgr silently queried and wrote a load of registry keys. Its job appears to be ensuring those keys stay unchanged, and if they're not, it restores them. Very interestingly, we see that the binary backs itself up in a special key of the registry. Really feels like malware persistence tactics in some way. On top of that, we see that our watchdog also tells services.exe to enable the UCPD back. Do you see that the start value is queried? The exe found that I set this value to 4, which stands for disabled, so it wrote back the 1, which is for enabled. This is precisely why the service was back after another reboot in the previous demonstration. First reboot logon set it to enabled again, and second reboot actually loaded it. Now, what is UCPD specifically protecting? To get a good grasp, all we have to do is inspect the strings in UCPD.sys. We can extract them using a sysinternals tool simply called strings, which will extract all strings it finds in a binary and can put them into a text file for us. You can find a download link in the description. Scrolling down far enough, we find a neat listing of keys which we can categorize into 4 groups. 1. Default applications, though limited to paths affecting browsers, PDF readers, and Microsoft Office tools. 2. Windows features that most people disable, like news feeds or web search, likely in an attempt to curb third-party tools from just disabling them. 3. The device region, so you can pretend to be in another region. And finally, 4. Values pertaining to itself that affect its own operation. Wait, device region? Yes. Let me explain. Remember the EU directive I mentioned earlier? Microsoft obeys it so much that it allows uninstallation of Edge. You heard that right, complete removal, but only on EU-based installations of Windows. On a US installation, or rest of world in general, it's not possible, but with my European installation I can do it no problem. Oida. We therefore conclude that Microsoft locked down the device region settings so tools cannot just spoof it on the fly to get rid of Edge. But hold on, it gets even sketchier. Scrolling through the strings, we notice a bunch of mostly Chinese certificate names, as well as names of Chinese browsers sprinkled in between these other things. What's up with those? Microsoft gave us no official documentation on this driver, not even an info that it exists. So at this point, all we could do is guess. Thankfully, people far better skilled than me have had a look and figured out what exactly is happening. A man named Shusheng Li made a wonderful blog article about this, you can find it in the description. Here's what he found in short. Only trusted binaries may change the protected keys. Trusted binaries are all those signed by Microsoft, except automatable utility tools like Reg, PowerShell, Regedit, which could be used to circumvent protection. The idea is to only allow changes through official avenues such as the Settings app, thus preventing malicious software from just hijacking the defaults. Otherwise, even a measly batch script could get you around the blocks. Some Chinese vendors seem to have taken that as an invitation to either inject code into the trusted Microsoft processes to modify the registry, or even just open the settings and press the UI button for the user automatically. As a consequence, Microsoft explicitly denialisted those applications from being able to do either thing. If, after all you've seen, you still want to disable it, you have to first disable UCPD via the command line, just like we have seen previously. And then make sure that the UCPD velocity task is turned off to stop it from respawning. After a single reboot, your UCPD is permanently disabled. But don't get too comfortable, Microsoft might re-enable it through an update without you noticing. This is certainly not the end of the story. As of today, we are at version 4.6 of the driver. The first versions were tame and allowed for many bypasses. For example, in the beginning, you were able to use PowerShell by cloning the exe to PowerShell 2 and using that one to modify the registry keys. But as vendors found and used workarounds, Microsoft kept upping the protection and closing these avenues off. As of today, you can just disable the service, as long as you remember to disable its watchdog too, though keep in mind this does feel like a workaround and malicious actors might employ the same tactic. We might see Microsoft close this avenue too, and then you'd have to resort to nuclear operations like safe mode. In conclusion, UCPD feels like a living contradiction. On the one hand, it protects user choices, but on the other hand, it also prevents them. The driver walks on an incredibly fine line between empowering the user to choose and disempowering bad faith actors from choosing for the user. What is your opinion? Do you feel more secure knowing that this driver is protecting you? Or do you feel patronized by the fact that you cannot manually change certain settings in the registry anymore? Let me know in the comments. See you next time. Fly out.